What's up, you guys? This is Devin from CenturyFX Studios, back with another video. Now, this video is for a friend of mine that really wants to get good on her camera. She says, hey, I need to know about this camera. What can you tell me? I know you know cameras. I know you do a lot of camera stuff with photography. Give me some tips. And that's why I'm going to entitle this video, Why Manual Mode is So Important. The first thing I told her was, get off of sport mode. I think she had it on sport mode or something like that, and she had like a Nikon 3100, 3200, whatever else Nikon makes. But but it's not necessarily about the camera. It's about what mode you're shooting in, what you understand about this camera, and how one you are with your camera. Pretty much. That's generally what manual mode is important for. Getting in control of your camera and the exact reason why you're doing your photography. You need to understand why. What are you taking a picture of? How important is that to you? And how important it is for you to master that moment the best way you possibly can. Now, you got to understand, with manual mode comes a responsibility. It comes with the responsibility of understanding aperture, shutter speed, and ISO. Now, shutter speed, the speed of your exposure as it relates to your camera and the environment that you're in. Aperture, the amount of light you let into your camera via your lens. So the aperture is inside of the lens, and this is an opening and closing device or a little contraption on the inside of your lens that limits the amount of light that you have, or opens and lets in more light now. And then ISO is just gain. It's just artificial gain, not necessarily artificial, but actually digital gain that your sensor has that you can up and lower based off of whatever situation you're in. So basically, it's about light sensitivity to your sensor. ISO is just a value that you give. It's like a muscle. The more light you need in your camera, the more sensitive you need to be to light, the higher the ISO number. The lower the ISO number, the less sensitive you need to be to light. So it's very bright outside. You're probably going to be shooting at like ISO 100 or the lowest ISO you can find, stuff like that. So you need to understand these variables. So going back to shutter speed is about the speed of exposure, right, as it relates to the environment, your camera that you're in. So you need to understand that the faster shutter speed, 1/8,000th of a second, that's extremely fast, will make your exposure very fast, so you can stop everything. Now it doesn't have to necessarily be that fast. This is just an arbitrary number that most cameras can shoot at. But if your camera can't shoot at that, you can shoot at a relatively fast shutter speed, like 1/500th of a second, stuff like that. For humans to catch just general motion without that much motion blur or still photography, about 1/25th of a second, something like that. So you got to understand what these speeds mean in the situation that you're in. And then you have to understand what shutter speed means to your exposure. The faster you shoot, the less light you're going to have, because that exposure it's fast. It's extremely fast. If you shoot at 1/8,000th of a second, there's only but so much light your camera can let in. And you might be saying, well, didn't the aperture control the amount of light? Yes, but if you snap off that image really, really fast, you can't let that much light in. So the faster your shutter speed is, the less light you let in. But if you're in a really, really bright environment, that doesn't matter. If you're out there in blinding sun, if you shoot at 1/8,000th of a second, you might be able to get that exposure down low enough to actually have an evenly lit image, or balanced or evenly exposed image. And that's usually what we all try to aim for, is an even image. Now, when I say even image, there's a little meter inside of your camera called the exposure value meter. It goes up and goes down. It has like a -1, -2, or something like that. What you want is your exposure to be in the center at 0. And that's one of the biggest parts of manual mode, tracking that exposure. Now, you as a human, you're probably going to miss that exposure a lot. But manual mode says, okay, even though you're going to miss it a lot, you can make minor adjustments and control everything about what you want. Now, you also have to understand that aperture and shutter speed control the look of the image probably the most. So I usually lean on those two to control the look. If I want a blurry background, I have to open that aperture up. If I want more light, I have to open that aperture up as wide as I can possibly do. That's lower f-stop numbers, like your f1.8, 2.8, f3.5. Typically, if you're a beginner, it's going to be 3.5 to 5.6, because those are the beginner lenses. But that's what you have to focus on. You have to focus on the speed of the image with the shutter speed. If you want a tight, nice and crisp, no motion blur shot, you're shooting at higher shutter speeds. If you want motion blur, shooting at lower shutter speeds and stuff like that. So those two, aperture and shutter speed, control the look of the image. ISO is just kind of an afterthought for me for most cameras, especially Nikon cameras, because ISO is just gain. The more gain you have, the more noise you're going to have. But the less gain you have, the less noise you're going to have. Now, I know she specifically knows what gain is because we both were tech majors in college. So we know that more noise, the worse the image is going to look. Now, instead of it being like audio noise, like snow on a TV, or audio noise like instead it becomes purple and pink little blotchy squares. I'm pretty sure most people have seen this, and the image doesn't look as good, doesn't look as crisp, and you don't have as much color reproduction as you did when you were in a light, nice, bright situation. Also, you have to understand that the camera can't see everything in every dark situation. There's a point in time where your camera won't be able to operate because you're just too dark in there. It's just too dark in there. Now, you can put it on manual focus and manual exposure, but at the end of the day, it may not still be able to focus. So if it can't focus, it can't take a picture. So that's a little caveat. But that's the main thing you really need to understand. It's just a crash course in manual mode. Put your camera in manual mode. Practice, practice, practice. You don't want to go out to an event or something like that and you're like, oh my goodness, I can't get this camera to work in manual mode. I can't get the best picture, so I won't take a picture. No, don't be like that. If you need to go back to an auto mode just to see exactly what the settings are, and maybe even go back to manual mode after you look at some settings from an automatic mode to try to get you in the right frame of mind for settings, do that. It'll help you a lot more. But at the end of the day, get into manual mode, because manual mode will instill that feeling that, hey, I have a responsibility not just to point the camera and shoot, but to think about what's coming into the camera, why it's coming into the camera, why I'm getting the results, and how I need to make my results better. And also, a little small note, when you get a chance, go ahead and start shooting RAW. RAW plus JPEG, probably, because if you're not used to editing RAW files, then you can have the JPEGs to fall back on. But you want to be able to shoot RAW, because not only are you controlling the image with manual, but you also going to be controlling the post-production, how much information you're letting into that image, and you're going to have more color production, you're going to have sharper images, so on and so forth. But you have to practice. The more you're able to get a better image, the better it's going to be. You're going to be happier, you're going to be prouder and stuff like that. I know my English is not all that great right now, but at the end of the day, use those tools to help you see the images, see how accurate your camera taking or photo taking ability is. I'm done with CenturyFX Studios, guys. Thanks for watching the video. This is mainly for my friend, giving her crash course, helping her remember what we talked about when we were working on other stuff. And she asked me about her camera. And get into manual mode, because manual mode will give you that responsibility, because you're no longer being a picture taker. You are creating the image from the ground up as best as you possibly can. I'm done with CenturyFX Studios once again, guys, and keep watching videos.